Chapter 1. The House on Maplewood Lane. The Henderson family arrived just before dusk, their SUV rumbling to a stop in front of the crooked iron gate of 47 Maplewood Lane. The house stood at the end of a leaf-choked road, half hidden behind towering oaks whose gnarled branches clawed at the twilight sky. The fading sun dripped red light through the branches, making the peeling blue paint of the Victorian shimmer like bruised skin. "Wow," whispered Emma, her face pressed to the window. "It looks like a haunted castle," Max snorted. "More like a haunted junkyard." But even he couldn't deny the chill that crawled up his neck. The air smelled of damp wood, rust, and something faintly sweet, like rotting apples. Somewhere deep in the trees an owl hooted and then another answered. Chester, their golden retriever, gave a low, uncertain growl. Mr. Henderson pushed open the gate. It moaned like something alive. The gravel driveway cracked under their shoes as they approached the porch, its boards warped and uneven. A rocking chair creaked lazily, moving back and forth on its own until the wind died, and it kept moving anyway. "Old houses make noises," Mrs. Henderson said quickly, her voice a little too bright. But when she touched the doorknob, it felt strangely warm, as though someone had just let go. Inside, the smell hit them first. Dust, old wallpaper glue, and something else, metallic and faintly sour. The hallway stretched long and narrow, lit only by the dying light filtering through lace curtains. At the far end hung a mirror, tall, cracked, and framed with blackened wood. Emma's reflection seemed to move a heartbeat slower than she did. The family spent the evening unpacking, trying to fill the silence with laughter and chatter. But the house swallowed sound. Every giggle seemed to echo down the halls, coming back quieter and thinner, like the house was listening. As the sun slipped behind the trees, Mrs. Henderson decided it was time to bring out the Halloween decorations. "Let's make this place feel like home," she said. She opened a box marked Halloween, the same box that had followed them from house to house. Inside were tangled orange lights, plastic pumpkins, and a life-sized witch doll whose glass eyes gleamed faintly even in the dim light. But at the bottom of the box lay something new, a burlap-faced scarecrow, folded awkwardly, straw limbs bent at impossible angles. Mr. Henderson frowned. "Where'd this come from?" Mrs. Henderson smiled uncertainly. "The little shop outside town, remember? The one that smelled like cinnamon and formaldehyde?" He chuckled. "Yeah, the old man told us to keep it inside after midnight. Guess he really leaned into the Halloween spirit." Emma giggled, hugging her stuffed rabbit. "Let's put him outside. He'll scare all the ghosts away." The family carried the scarecrow into the yard. Its clothes were tattered, the fabric heavy and damp. When Mr. Henderson propped it up, straw spilled from one sleeve like thin yellow veins. He pressed the post into the ground, wiped his hands on his jeans, and stepped back. The scarecrow's grin was uneven, sewn crookedly with black thread. Its button eyes caught the porch light, glinting red for just a second, though no one seemed to notice. By the time the last decoration was up, fake cobwebs, flickering pumpkins, and a glowing cauldron in the window, the wind had begun to rise. The trees whispered and bent, and the porch lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. That night, the Hendersons celebrated with cocoa and popcorn. They watched an old monster movie until Emma fell asleep between her parents on the couch. Max tried to act brave, but every so often his eyes darted toward the window. "Did that scarecrow just move?" he murmured. "Wind," his dad said, though he didn't look. "Just wind." When the clock struck 11, they carried Emma to her new room upstairs. Chester padded behind them, his tail low, his ears pricked. The old dog refused to lie near the window, whining softly until Mrs. Henderson sighed and let him sleep at the foot of the bed. Outside, the yard was still. The scarecrow's arms stretched wide in the cold October air. A car passed in the distance, its headlights sweeping across the lawn, and for a heartbeat it looked as though the scarecrow's head had turned to follow the light. Midnight came quietly. The grandfather clock downstairs began to chime. 1. The trees outside rustled, though there was no wind. 2. The porch swing creaked slowly forward. 3. Somewhere inside the walls, faint footsteps echoed. 4. The witch's green cauldron flickered, its light turning blood red. 5. The mirror in the hallway sighed, a low, stretching sound as though the glass itself were breathing. 6. Upstairs, Emma's rabbit fell from the bed. Chester lifted his head and whined. 7. The front door latch clicked open, though every window was locked. 8. The rocking chair began to move again, slowly, deliberately. 9. The scarecrow's burlap face twitched, just slightly as though smiling wider. 10. Its head turned, all the way toward the house. 11. The hollow eyes glowed faintly red. 12. The chime lingered in the air like a scream caught in a throat. And then silence. The night held its breath. A single crow landed on the fence, ruffling its feathers, watching the scarecrow with black, glimmering eyes. It gave a low, rasping caw, and the scarecrow's straw-stuffed hand twitched in reply. Inside, Emma stirred, whispering in her sleep. "He's looking at us." And from the yard, just below her window, came the faint sound of burlap dragging against wood. A slow, patient shuffle, like something learning how to move again. Chapter 2. The Whispering Cornfield. Morning broke clean and golden, washing away the memory of the strange night. Birds sang in the oaks, and the Hendersons filled the kitchen with the smell of cinnamon toast. "See," Mr. Henderson said. "Nothing to it, just an old house settling." Max poked at his pancakes. "Then why was the porch swing moving after the wind stopped?" "Momentum," his father said, smiling thinly. Emma fed Chester a crumb. "Can ghosts do momentum?" Mrs. Henderson laughed, but her fingers trembled when she set down her coffee. Outside, sunlight sharpened every edge of the yard. The children were sent to gather fallen branches. Beyond the lawn stretched a ragged border of weeds, and behind that, a wide cornfield that hadn't been there when they'd toured the property in summer. The stalks rose shoulder-high and whispered even when the air was still. "Hey," Max said. The scarecrow moved. The post near the driveway was empty. The burlap figure now leaned toward the corn, a faint drag mark showing how it had shifted. "Dad must have—" "He didn't," Emma cut in. "Mom's inside." Chester growled low. They crept closer. The scarecrow's grin had torn wider, the burlap dark around the mouth as if it had gotten wet. A smell like smoke and mold drifted from the straw. "Don't touch it," Max warned. He didn't know why. The corn hissed. The sound carried shapes of words, half-syllables that melted when they turned their heads. "It said my name," Emma whispered. "It's just the wind." But Max's pulse disagreed. By afternoon, the house looked almost cheerful again. Mr. Henderson strung orange lights. Mrs. Henderson arranged cobwebs, and neighbors stopped to admire the display. Only Mrs. Banner frowned. "Keep an eye on that corn," she said softly. "It grows too fast out here." Then she hurried away. Night fell hard and sudden. The family played a board game until yawns won out. Upstairs, Max lay awake. Physics, he told himself. Momentum. Words that felt flimsy as tissue. A draft whispered through the vent, then another sound. "Max." He froze. "Emma?" Silence, then again, a little louder, drawn out through the floorboards. Maxwell Allen Henderson. The name used only by his mother. He grabbed the flashlight and padded downstairs. The mirror in the hallway caught his reflection a beat late. He didn't look twice. Outside, October had teeth. The scarecrow stood nearer the field again, its button eyes dull until the beam of light struck them. "Physics," Max muttered and stepped off the porch. The beam carved a pale road through the grass. The corn swayed though the air was still. "Who's there?" he called. The field answered with a hush that felt deliberate. Then came a faint rustle, click, drag, pause. Not footsteps. Not quite. He crossed the border. Leaves slapped his sleeves. The smell of dirt thickened. The flashlight's halo made a narrow tunnel. Outside it, the night pressed close. He should have turned back. Instead, he followed the whisper of his own name. Bits of straw littered the ground, some burnt at the ends. He followed them into a small clearing where the corn bent away, forming a perfect circle. In the center stood a figure on a short post, a scarecrow no taller than him, wearing a torn blue plaid shirt exactly like the one in his laundry hamper. Its sewn grin mimicked his crooked smile. He stopped breathing. "Is this a joke?" He managed. The scarecrow's head tilted. just like his did when he was confused. The corn swayed backward, enclosing them in a dry sigh. He swept the beam around and caught another scrap of white plastic glinting near the post. Maplewood Seasonals. Custom piece model. Boy. Size. Youth note. After midnight. Keep inside. His stomach dropped. He remembered the old shop and the smell of cinnamon and formaldehyde. Keep inside, the man had said. The corn breathed again, his name multiplied 100-fold. Leaves brushed his neck. He lifted the flashlight and for a second saw other shapes among the stalks. Taller posts, faint burlap faces turning as one. Then, "Max?" Emma's voice distant but real. "Don't come in," he shouted. "Stay on the lawn." Her name rippled through the field like a secret passed hand to hand. Emma, Emma. A sudden gust ripped through the corn, bending it flat. He saw the porch lights ahead and ran, branches clawing his arms. He burst from the field onto the grass, gasping, mud on his knees. Emma grabbed his sleeve. Chester barked and pressed against him. "What were you doing?" He looked back once. The scarecrow near the border had returned to its place perfectly still. Only the soil at its feet was freshly turned, as if something underneath had shifted. They crept inside. Max slid both bolts home. The witch's green cauldron pulsed steadily in the window. In the hallway mirror, the reflections stood side by side. Behind them, in the glass, a third shape waited on the porch, taller, motionless, head cocked in curiosity. Max turned. No one there. When he faced the mirror again, the shape was gone. "Max," Emma whispered, "what happens on Fridays again?" He thought of the tag, the warning, the calendar. "Nothing," he lied. "We're fine tonight." The house settled with a sigh that wasn't quite a sigh, and outside the corn began to whisper again. Soft, patient, and hungry. Chapter 3. The Friday Night Harvest. Friday morning arrived under a washed-out sky. A thin mist rolled across the yard, curling around the fence posts, and the scarecrow like smoke that refused to rise. The Hendersons ate breakfast in uneasy silence. Nobody mentioned the whispers or the corn or how Max's window had been open when he woke, though he swore he had locked it. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "New day, new start," he said. "We've got chores to do." Mrs. Henderson forced a smile. "Let's make the best of it. The fall festival's next week. Maybe we'll have the prettiest yard on the street." But even as she spoke, her reflection in the microwave blinked half a second later than she did. Outside, the air hung heavy, as if the world had forgotten to breathe. The grass shimmered with dew, yet the edge of the cornfield was bone dry. The scarecrow still stood at its post, shoulders crooked, burlap grin wider than ever. Mr. Henderson started the lawnmower and set off across the yard. The engine coughed, but held steady until he reached the far edge near the corn. Then it sputtered and died. He kicked the blade housing, muttering. When he crouched to check underneath, something caught his eye. A trail of small, bare footprints pressed into the soft dirt. They were child-sized, but deep, like whoever made them had been carrying weight. "Max," he called, but the house didn't answer. Only the corn hissed long and low. He followed the prints for a few feet before they disappeared into the first row of stalks. Beyond that, the path turned darker, as if the soil itself had been burned. He backed away slowly, the mower forgotten. Inside, Emma sat cross-legged at the dining table with a stack of crayons. She was humming, drawing something intently. When Mrs. Henderson passed behind her, she froze. On the page was a picture of the yard, the house, the cornfield, the crooked scarecrow. Crooked. But in the field, Emma had drawn 5 figures, all with button eyes and sewn grins. "Honey," Mrs. Henderson said softly. "Who are the others?" Emma shrugged. "The family," she said. "They told me they were waiting." "Who told you that?" Emma looked up, her eyes distant. "The corn." Mrs. Henderson's smile faltered. She gathered the drawing and slid it under a stack of mail. "Let's keep this between us, okay?" By late afternoon, the wind picked up. The old house creaked in rhythm with the gusts, the same way a ship groans before a storm. Max stayed near the window, watching the corn ripple like a green ocean, Once he thought he saw the scarecrow's arm rise and fall with the waves, as though it were signaling to someone unseen. When dusk came, the Hendersons gathered in the living room. Mr. Henderson suggested a movie to keep things light. Mrs. Henderson made popcorn, though she burned the first batch. The smell of smoke clung to the air like a memory. The witch doll glowed softly on the shelf, its cauldron pulsing from green to a dull, throbbing red. Halfway through the film, the lights flickered. Chester raised his head and barked once, sharp and alarmed. The sound echoed up the stairwell, bouncing back as though something upstairs barked in reply. Probably the wiring, Mr. Henderson said, standing. Old house, old circuits. But the expression on his face didn't match his words. Upstairs, the mirrors began to hum. It was faint at first, like the vibration of distant traffic, but it grew louder, a resonant thrum that made the glass quiver. Mrs. Henderson climbed the stairs and froze at the landing. The hallway mirror, the tall one with the cracked frame, was flickering, the reflections moving independently. In it, she saw herself descend the steps she hadn't taken yet. She reached out to touch the glass. The reflection smiled before she did. She jerked back, her pulse roaring in her ears. When she blinked, the mirror was normal again. She laughed nervously, wiping her palms on her jeans. "Just nerves," she whispered. "Just nerves." But she couldn't shake the faint warmth of the glass against her skin, as though it had been alive. By 9 o'clock, the sky turned the color of rust. Clouds gathered without sound, pressing low. The wind died completely. Mr. Henderson locked the front door and double-checked every window. "No more nighttime adventures," he said, looking pointedly at Max. Max nodded but didn't speak. The grandfather clock ticked on. 10 o'clock, 11. Then the air changed. It wasn't colder, not exactly. It was heavier, full of static and the faint scent of burnt straw. The witch doll's cauldron glowed blood red. The porch light flickered out. The first whisper came from the corn, sliding across the yard like a sigh. Then another. Then dozens. The words were impossible to make out, but the rhythm was unmistakable. A chant, old and steady, in time with the heartbeat of the wind. The scarecrow's head turned slowly toward the house. Chester growled, teeth bared. The lights dimmed, then surged back, casting every shadow long and thin. From the kitchen something toppled, a glass shattered. The family gathered in the living room, instinctively huddling close. "What's happening?" Emma whimpered. "It's just..." Mrs. Henderson started, but then stopped. The sound outside was louder now, overlapping voices whispering in perfect unison. Through the window, the cornfield was alive with movement. Stalks bent and straightened in waves. Figures rose from the rows, first one, then two, then five. Each wore a crooked smile sewn with thick black thread. Each looked familiar. Max's throat went dry. "Mom," he said softly, "they look like us." One of the scarecrows was his exact height, wearing a blue plaid shirt, its burlap face stitched in his grin. Another, shorter, had straw pigtails and Emma's favorite yellow sweater. A taller one wore his dad's flannel jacket. The last two, one thin, one small, mirrored Mrs. Henderson and Chester. The scarecrows began to sway. The chanting rose. Mr. Henderson shouted, "Everyone upstairs." They ran, footsteps thudding on the old stairs, the air humming with whispers. In Emma's room, the lights flickered violently, the bulb strobing so fast it looked like lightning trapped in glass. The family clutched each other as the clock downstairs began to strike 12. 1. The chanting stopped. 2. Silence pressed against the windows. 3. The witch doll's cauldron cracked with a flash of red light. 4. Chester barked at the door, fur raised. 5. A faint scraping sound came from the porch and like straw brushing wood. 6. Something heavy stepped onto the first stair. 7. A second step, then another. 8. The walls pulsed faintly as though the house itself were breathing. 9. The front door creaked open. 10. Shadows stretched across the hallway. 11. The air buzzed like static, mirrors trembling. 12. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Knock, knock, knock. The last chime of midnight faded. In the silence that followed, Emma's voice came soft as a whisper. Should I let them in? The mirror beside the bed rippled once and smiled. Chapter 4. The Reflection Room. The 3 knocks still echoed long after they stopped. Each one seemed to linger in the air, absorbed by the walls and fed back as a faint vibration through the floorboards. The Hendersons stood frozen in Emma's room, listening. The house didn't creak anymore. It watched. Outside, the cornfield was perfectly still under the blood-red moon. Inside, every light flickered to half-glow. "Stay here," Mr. Henderson whispered. He crept down the stairs with a baseball bat clutched tight. The wood beneath his feet groaned once, twice, then fell quiet as if the house were holding its breath. He reached the front door. Nothing waited on the porch. The pumpkin's candles had all gone out. Only the scarecrow remained at the edge of the yard, head turned toward the house, grin wide enough to split the seams. He locked the door again, heart pounding. When he looked up, the tall hallway mirror reflected him, except the reflection wasn't moving. It just stood there, one hand on the bat, smiling faintly. Then the reflection blinked even though he hadn't. He stumbled backward, knocking over the umbrella stand. When he looked again, the mirror was normal. "Just nerves," he muttered, echoing his wife's words from the night before. But the reflection in the glass mouthed something he couldn't hear. Upstairs, the family huddled around Emma's bed. She was drawing again, pressing the crayons so hard they snapped. Her picture showed the house, but not from outside. This time she drew it from inside the mirror. The rooms were the same but reversed, and the family inside was smiling while the real ones weren't. "Emma," Mrs. Henderson said softly. "What are you drawing?" "Our house," Emma replied without looking up. "The other one." "The other one?" She nodded. "My mirror friend says we're almost ready to switch." The air in the room grew colder. The window fogged from the inside, and words appeared in the condensation as if written by a fingertip. "Open the door." Mrs. Henderson grabbed a towel and wiped it clean, her hands shaking. "No more mirrors," she said. "No more drawings. No more talk about—" But she stopped because the tall mirror near Emma's dresser was no longer showing their reflection. It was showing the hallway downstairs, except the hallway looked darker, longer, and someone was standing at the bottom of the stairs, someone that looked exactly like Mr. Henderson. "Holding the same bat, John?" she called. From downstairs her husband answered, "Yeah?" The figure in the mirror tilted its head. They moved through the house in tight formation now, Emma in her mother's arms, Max leading with a flashlight. Every mirror they passed showed something wrong. A shadow moving in the wrong direction, a smile lingering too long, eyes blinking out of sync. "Don't look too long," Max said quietly. "That's how it starts." "How what starts?" Emma asked. He didn't answer because in the reflection behind her a second Emma grinned wide, teeth too white, eyes too still. In the living room, the witch doll had fallen from the shelf. Its cauldron lay in shards, glowing faintly red from the inside. The air smelled of ozone and burnt straw. The grandfather clock read 11:53. Its pendulum swung slower than it should. Mr. Henderson dragged a sheet from the laundry basket and began covering the mirrors one by one. The moment the fabric touched the glass, handprints appeared beneath it, small, childlike, pressing outward. Mrs. Henderson sobbed. "We should leave now." But when Mr. Henderson tried the front door, it wouldn't budge. The bolt turned, but the wood held firm. He threw his weight against it. The hinges groaned. Then something laughed from the other side, a low, wet sound. He backed away. The doors, breathing. The sheet on the hallway mirror slipped halfway off, and through the gap they saw something impossible, a room that looked just like theirs, but with everything slightly reversed, the furniture mirrored, the pictures flipped, even the shadows cast in opposite directions. And in that room, their reflections stood watching them. Max stepped forward, hypnotized. "They are us." The mirror Max waved first, but his timing was wrong, half a second early. Then he pressed his hand against the glass. His skin looked darker, as though the world on that side was lit by red flame. "Don't," Mrs. Henderson whispered. But it was too late. The real Max raised his hand and touched the mirror. The surface rippled like water. His reflection grabbed his fingers. He gasped as the glass pulled him forward, half swallowing his arm. The reflection smiled wider, tugging harder. Mrs. Henderson screamed, grabbing his waist and pulling back. The air filled with the sound of glass cracking. "Let go," she shouted. The reflection's hand twisted, turning cold and rubbery. Max screamed as the mirror flared white, throwing them both backward. The glass smoothed. For a moment it was empty. Then Max opened his eyes. His parents rushed to him. "Are you hurt?" He blinked, disoriented. I think I'm fine." But behind him his reflection moved. Slowly, independently. It blinked once, too slow, and smiled. Later, as they gathered in the living room, the air felt wrong. The ticking of the clock no longer matched time. It hesitated between seconds. "Something's changed," Mrs. Henderson whispered. "It feels different." Max looked pale. His voice came out low and distant. "Maybe it's over." But when he turned his head, his reflection in the darkened TV screen didn't turn with him. It stood perfectly still, smiling. That night, none of them slept. The mirrors stayed covered, but faint tapping sounds came from behind each one. Chester growled until he was hoarse. At 2 a.m., the hallway mirror bulged inward, just slightly, like something was pressing against it from the other side. The sheet trembled. From underneath, a voice whispered softly, clearly, perfectly calm. Almost midnight again. Then the glass cracked, and the whisper came once more. This time in Max's own voice. "Let's switch." Chapter 5. The Lost Hour. The night after the mirror cracked, time began to slip. The Hendersons noticed it first in small ways. The grandfather clock would chime 13 times instead of 12. The microwave timer froze on 000 but never beeped, and when Mrs. Henderson looked at her wristwatch, the second hand ticked forward, then back, then forward again. "Probably needs a new battery," she said. Though her voice trembled, the air in the house felt heavier now, like the walls were filled with water instead of air. Every sound carried an echo. Even footsteps came back a heartbeat late, like someone was walking right behind them. Outside, the cornfield had gone gray-green. The scarecrow still stood at its post, but there were now two beside it. One wore Max's torn blue shirt, the other Emma's yellow sweater. Both faced the house, grinning like they knew what time it was. At breakfast, Mr. Henderson spread his notes across the table. "I'm making sense of this," he said. "There's a pattern. Every Friday, strange things happen at midnight. Mirrors, whispers, shadows, always at midnight." Max looked up from his untouched cereal. "But last night it started early." "Exactly," his dad said. "It's shifting. Whatever this is, it's moving closer." Emma, pale and tired, traced circles on the table. "Maybe it's because of the broken mirror." "Maybe they're angry." No one answered. Chester barked at the wall. By mid-morning, sunlight vanished as clouds gathered unnaturally fast. The yard dimmed to twilight. Mr. Henderson went down to the basement to check the circuit breaker, but when he flipped the switch, the lights flickered before he touched it. "Electric's fine," he called up. "It's the house." When he came back upstairs, the clocks had all stopped. "Every single one read 11:59 power surge?" Mrs. Henderson asked. He shook his head. No surge, no ticking either. Then Max noticed something stranger. The radio on the counter was still playing, but the voice on it wasn't the usual DJ. It was his own voice. "They can't hear us yet," it said softly, "but they will at midnight." He unplugged the radio. It kept talking for 2 more seconds before dying. That evening, the family sat together in the living room, afraid to separate. The windows reflected their faces like faint ghosts. Outside, the scarecrows were gone. The corn bent low as if bowing to something unseen. "Maybe we should leave town," Mrs. Henderson said. "A hotel, a friend's place, anything." "We can't," Mr. Henderson replied. "I tried the car. The engine won't even turn over. And the phone lines are dead." Emma looked at the grandfather clock. "What time is it now?" "Still 11:59, Max said." She frowned. "But it's dark." And that's when they heard it, a sound like a breath drawn through wood. The clock's pendulum began to swing again, slower than before. Heavy as a heartbeat, then the second hand moved. Backwards. The house sighed. long and deep. The lights dimmed to red like sunset bleeding through the walls. The air thickened until every breath felt like wading through syrup. "It's starting again," Max whispered. "But it's not midnight yet." Mr. Henderson tried the front door. It opened this time onto nothing. Not the porch, not the yard, not the cornfield. Just black space, stretching endlessly, humming faintly. He slammed the door shut. When he turned around, the hallway behind him was longer. The wallpaper repeated itself, stretching into infinity. They ran for the stairs, but halfway up the steps kept going. The top floor was gone, replaced by more stairs, spiraling upward into the same dark that had swallowed the yard. Emma clutched her mother's hand. "We're inside the mirror now." Mrs. Henderson wanted to deny it, but every mirror they passed was now solid. No reflection, no glass, just walls of black that breathed faintly. At the top of the endless staircase, they found a room none of them had ever seen. The door was made of glass, fogged over from within. Words were scrawled across it in backward letters, the lost hour. The doorknob was cold. Mr. Henderson turned it. The door opened into a space that wasn't a room at all. It was suspended in darkness, floorless, wallless, filled with slow-moving light like liquid moonfire. Inside hung hundreds of clocks, old, new, broken, pristine, all frozen at 12. And in the center of it all stood a figure wearing a black coat stitched from mirror shards. Its face was smooth glass, reflecting each of them at once. "Who are you?" Mrs. Henderson whispered. The figure's head tilted. The reflections inside it spoke in harmony. "You are." Then the clocks began to tick again, but backward, all at once. The figure gestured and the air rippled. Suddenly the family was surrounded by their own reflections, hovering in the dark, each one whispering something different. "Let us out." "You already did." "It's Friday again. We have to harvest the hour." Emma began to cry. "Make them stop." The mirrored figure crouched before her, its glass face rippling into a faint smile. "The harvest takes only what you give," it said in a voice that wasn't a voice. "Your time, your hour, yourselves." It reached out and the clocks began to melt, their faces dripping like wax. The sound of ticking turned to dripping water. Mr. Henderson grabbed Emma and pulled her close. "Stay behind me." But Max was already moving. He stepped toward the figure. "You want an hour? Take mine." The figure tilted its head again. "Brave, but 1 hour isn't enough." Max lunged forward, smashing the flashlight into its face. The mirror shattered, light exploded, and suddenly they were falling. They landed in the living room. Everything looked normal again. The lights were steady. The air was light. The clocks read 12:01. Mrs. Henderson laughed shakily. "It's over," Max sat up, dizzy. "It has to be." But when he looked at the grandfather clock, he froze. The pendulum was swinging forward again, smooth and steady. And at the bottom of the glass, a faint reflection smiled back at him. It wasn't his face. It was the mirrored figures. And as the clock struck one final time, every clock in the house reset itself to 11:59. Chapter 6. The Hollow Fields. By the time Friday came again, the Hendersons no longer marked days by dates or clocks. The world inside the house had its own rhythm now, heartbeat slow, air thick, mirrors breathing in sync with them. Every window showed the same sky, no matter the hour, a bruised twilight neither night nor day. The clocks had frozen again at 11:59, but sometimes their hands twitched forward, daring to reach 12 before snapping back. Max sat on the floor beside Chester, staring at the radio. It had been silent for hours, but now it crackled with static. Through the hiss came faint whispers, almost harvest time. Someone must go. He turned the knob, but it wasn't plugged in. Downstairs, Mr. Henderson packed a duffel bag. "We're leaving tonight," he said, stuffing clothes and flashlights inside. "We can't wait for another midnight." Mrs. Henderson looked hollow, dark circles under her eyes. "The last time you opened the door, it wasn't our yard out there. This time I'll make sure." He loaded the shotgun he'd found in the basement. "If that thing wants a harvest, it'll get one. But not us." Emma was sitting by the window drawing again. Her picture showed the cornfield, but this time one of the scarecrows was missing. She pointed to the empty spot. "Someone has to take his place," she said quietly. Her father froze. "What do you mean?" "That's what the mirror told me." Dusk came earlier than ever, falling like a curtain. The sky glowed deep orange, bleeding into black. The house groaned as if something inside it were shifting its weight. When Mr. Henderson opened the door, cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet soil and iron. The cornfield stretched before him, endless, moving like a living sea. At the edge of it stood a figure, the scarecrow in his flannel jacket. It was facing the house now. "Stay here," he said. He stepped off the porch. Each footfall sank deeper into the earth. The wind carried whispers, soft and rhythmic, like the murmuring of a congregation. As he drew closer, he saw that the scarecrow's head wasn't burlap anymore. It was wood, roughly carved in his likeness. The button eyes were gone, replaced by hollow sockets, and from inside those sockets faint candlelight flickered. Inside the house, Mrs. Henderson clutched Emma and Max close. The floor vibrated beneath their feet, slow and steady, like something enormous breathing under the foundation. The mirrors had uncovered themselves. No matter how many times they'd been draped, the sheets were gone again, folded neatly on the floor. In every reflection, the family appeared, but their mirrored selves stood farther away now, receding into darkness. Behind each mirrored version of them, other shapes began to form, twisted silhouettes wearing straw hats and sewn grins. Emma whimpered. "They're closer than before." Mrs. Henderson looked toward the door. "Where's your father?" Mr. Henderson had reached the first row of corn. The stalks towered over him, swaying though the air was still. The scarecrow tilted its head as he approached. "I'm done with this," he said aloud. "You hear me? You can take your cursed hour in your field and leave my family alone." The scarecrow didn't move, but behind it the corn parted like water. A narrow path opened, lined with faintly glowing pumpkins that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. At the end of the path stood another figure, taller. Its face was glass, fractured like a broken clock, reflecting his every motion a second late. "You again," he muttered, the mirror creature from the lost hour. Its voice came like wind through wheat. "One must stay to close the field." "I'm not staying." The creature tilted its head. "Then the field grows forever." He raised the shotgun and fired. The blast echoed, scattering crows into the dark. When the smoke cleared, the creature was still standing, but now it was closer. Its mirrored face rippled and changed, now showing his own reflection. The reflection smiled. "You already stayed." Back in the house, the walls began to pulse, the wallpaper soft as skin. Every picture frame trembled. The floorboards warped beneath their feet, forming uneven ridges like ribs. "Dad!" Max shouted, running for the front door. But when he opened it, the steps led directly into the cornfield. The house had moved. Mrs. Henderson grabbed him. "Don't go," he said, "to stay together." "But he's out there." The corn whispered louder, voices overlapping. Hundreds now, all speaking the same phrase. "The field is hollow. The field is waiting." The hallway mirror cracked straight down the middle. From the gap oozed a thin line of black sap glistening like tar. Emma screamed. The mirror across the room rippled and something pressed against it from the other side. Fingers made of straw. Mr. Henderson staggered forward, deeper into the corn. The glow of the pumpkins dimmed behind him until only moonlight remained. The air smelled of damp earth and rot. He stopped in a clearing. The scarecrows were waiting there, dozens of them, each one wearing a familiar face, neighbors. Strangers, maybe even the families who'd lived here before. At the center stood the mirrored creature, its fractured face spinning slowly like the hands of a clock. "Your hour is due," it said. He fell to his knees, exhausted. "If I give myself, will they be free?" The creature crouched. For a while, he closed his eyes. "Then take me." It reached out and touched his chest. The field erupted in light, green and gold and terrible. In the house, every clock struck midnight at once. Mrs. Henderson screamed as the mirrors shattered, shards flying like glass rain. Each shard reflected a different version of the world, some dark, some bright, some burning. The sound was deafening, like 1,000 ticking hearts breaking in unison. Then silence. The air went still. The clocks read 12. When the dust cleared, the house was empty. Only Emma, Max, and Chester remained. The front door creaked open on its own. Outside, the cornfield was gone, just flat soil under a gray dawn sky. Emma whispered, "Dad did it." Max nodded, though tears streaked his face. He closed it, but when they stepped outside, the soil wasn't empty. At the very edge of the yard, a single scarecrow stood, newly built, its jacket familiar. Its head bowed slightly. In its straw-stuffed hand hung a silver watch, ticking backward. The tag tied around its wrist read, Maplewood Seasonals. Model Father. Note, returns Friday. Chapter 7, The Final Chime. The next sunrise didn't feel real. It hung in the sky like a painting, flat, motionless, drained of warmth. The Henderson house stood quiet under it, its windows dark, its porch coated in a fine layer of dust that hadn't been there the night before. Max and Emma sat at the kitchen table staring at untouched bowls of cereal. Chester paced, whining at the door. "He's really gone," Emma whispered. Max didn't answer. He'd spent half the night digging through the field, calling their father's name until his voice broke. There was no corn anymore, only an empty expanse of cracked dirt. And yet, if you listened closely, you could still hear the faint rustle of stalks in the distance. Mrs. Henderson hadn't spoken since sunrise. She stood at the sink, washing the same cup over and over. The water ran gray, though the tap was clear. At 11:59, every clock in the house ticked once, then stopped. By mid-morning, the house began to hum again, a low vibration that made the walls shudder and the windows pulse in their frames. Mrs. Henderson gripped the counter. "It's starting again." Max shook his head. "No, Dad ended it. He closed the field," but Emma pointed toward the window. "Then why's he still out there?" They all turned. At the far edge of the yard, where the soil met the trees, the scarecrow wearing their father's jacket stood perfectly still, just like before. But now its head was lifted and its mouth had opened into a jagged O of burlap and straw. The wind rose, carrying faint words. Almost time. By afternoon, the sky dimmed to red again and shadows began to lengthen even without the sun. The family gathered in the living room, too afraid to separate. The radio on the mantel clicked on by itself. Static whispered for a moment, then cleared. A voice came through, low, distorted, half familiar. "This is Maplewood. Time of day, 11:59. The hour begins soon. Prepare to chime." Mrs. Henderson unplugged the radio. It kept talking. "The harvest repeats until all reflections are whole." Then it went silent. That night, when the final sliver of daylight faded, the house sealed itself again. The doors swelled shut, the locks turned on their own, and the mirrors uncovered themselves, all shining faintly in the dark. Max took Emma's hand. "We have to go before midnight. Through the mirror, whatever's behind it. But what if we get stuck?" she asked. He looked around the room, at the warped walls, at the ticking that had started again inside the walls. "If we stay, we already are." Mrs. Henderson grabbed a flashlight and led the way down the hallway. The air thickened with the smell of smoke and iron. The floorboards trembled. The grandfather clock struck once. 11:59. The hallway mirror rippled like water again. This time they saw not their reflections but the other house. The mirrored world shimmered beyond the glass, reversed and glowing faintly red. The mirrored versions of themselves stood waiting inside it. Max's reflection stepped forward first. "It's your turn," it said. Emma's reflection tilted its head, smiling too wide. "We've waited 7 Fridays." Then the pendulum inside the grandfather clock stopped mid-swing. The ticking ceased. Silence pressed against their eardrums like a scream held back. Mrs. Henderson whispered, "We go on my count. 3, 2. But she never said 1. Because from upstairs came 3 heavy footsteps, then a 4th, then a dragging sound, something being pulled slowly across the floor. Max aimed the flashlight up the stairwell. The beam wavered. At the top of the steps stood the scarecrow, wearing their father's flannel jacket. Straw fell from its sleeves like sand. "Dad?" Emma whispered. It moved its head slowly side to side. The movement made a dry, creaking sound. Its hollow eyes began to glow from within. Faint red at first, then brighter, like coals catching flame. The figure stepped down, 1 foot at a time. The wood groaned under its weight, though it left no footprints, only black scorch marks. "Go," Max shouted. They ran for the mirror. The glass quivered as they approached, swirling like liquid mercury. The mirrored family inside moved in sync, mirroring their panic. Max pressed his hand against the surface. Cold shot through his arm. "Push!" he yelled. Mrs. Henderson grabbed Emma and shoved her through first. The glass bent around them, swallowing them whole. Max followed. But as he did, the scarecrow's hand shot forward, grabbing his shoulder. He screamed, twisting, feeling straw and wood grind against his skin. The thing pulled him back, whispering in his father's voice. "You can't leave time unfinished." He slammed the flashlight into its face. The glass cracked again, releasing a blast of freezing air. He stumbled through the mirror and the world inverted. The mirrored house was red and endless, lit by a sickly glow. Every surface gleamed as though coated in oil. Clocks covered the walls, ticking backward. Mrs. Henderson and Emma stood nearby, surrounded by hundreds of reflections of themselves, each one slightly different. Each whispering, "We're not free yet," Emma said. Max nodded. "We have to find the clock." They ran through the mirrored halls, the floor shimmering beneath their feet like water. Behind them, footsteps followed, slow and steady, dragging straw. At the far end of the corridor stood a giant clock face built into the wall. Its hands were spinning in reverse, faster and faster. Mrs. Henderson shouted, "Stop it! That's what's holding us here." Max climbed the frame, gripping the edge of the glass hand. "How? Break it!" He swung the flashlight hard. The glass cracked but didn't shatter. A whisper filled the air, familiar, echoing their father's voice. "Break it and time stops forever." He hesitated. "Dad?" The voice softened. "If you stop it, you stay here. But they go free." Max looked down at his mother and sister. Emma's eyes were wide with tears. "We'll come back for you," she said. He smiled weakly. "Promise." Then he swung the flashlight again. The glass shattered. A wave of silence rolled through the mirrored house. The air turned weightless. The floor dissolved beneath them. Emma screamed as she fell through red light. Mrs. Henderson reached for her hand, and then everything went black. When Emma opened her eyes, she was lying on the grass outside. Morning sunlight bathed the yard in gold. Birds sang again. The cornfield was gone, replaced by empty soil. Her mother knelt beside her, crying. "It's over," she whispered. They looked at the house. Its windows were empty, its paint dull, its porch still. Max was nowhere to be seen. On the porch sat the shattered remains of the grandfather clock. Its hands were frozen at 12. Beside it, a small round mirror lay cracked in half. In the reflection, for just a moment, Emma saw her brother's face smiling back at her. Then the reflection blinked and was gone. That night, as the sun set and the first stars appeared, Mrs. Henderson tucked Emma into bed. "You're safe now," she whispered. But when she turned off the light, a faint sound came from downstairs. Tick, then another tick, and somewhere in the house, muffled but unmistakable, a boy's voice whispered through the walls. "One more chime." Chapter 8. The Harvest Ends. Morning light spilled through the cracked windows of 47 Maplewood Lane, soft and golden, painting the dust in slow motion. For the first time in weeks, the world felt still. No whispers, no ticking, just silence, thick, uneasy silence. Emma sat on the front steps, her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the empty field beyond the yard. The soil was flat and cold, the corn long gone. Still, when the wind blew, she swore she could hear faint rustling, the sound of dry stalks brushing together. Behind her, the house sighed softly as if settling in for a long sleep. Mrs. Henderson stepped outside. A blanket draped over her shoulders. She looked pale but calm, her eyes hollow from too many sleepless nights. "You should eat something," she said. Emma shook her head. "It's not over." Her mother knelt beside her. "It's over, baby. Your father, Max..." They stopped it. Emma's gaze didn't move. "Then why's the clock ticking again?" Mrs. Henderson froze. She hadn't noticed it before, but now she heard it, faint, far away from inside the house. Tick, tick, tick. That night, Emma dreamed of the field. The soil was glass. The sky was silver. Her brother stood at the center of it all, translucent. Older somehow, like time had been running faster where he was. He raised his hand in greeting. "Emma," he said, his voice echoing. "You're almost done." "I thought you were free," she said, tears in her eyes. He smiled sadly. The clock only paused. The harvest hour still exists. It's waiting for someone to finish it. Then come home, she pleaded. We'll finish it together. He shook his head. Only one can cross at a time. If it's me, it starts again. The glass beneath his feet cracked. A red light glowed underneath, pulsing like a heartbeat. You have to end it, he said. Break the last mirror. Emma woke up gasping. Her hand was bleeding, a thin cut across her palm still fresh. In the morning, she searched the house. Room by room, she checked every mirror. Most were shattered from that final night. Others had gone dull, their surfaces cloudy and harmless, all except one. In the attic, behind an old trunk covered in dust and cobwebs, she found it, a round, antique mirror framed in carved vines and roses. Its glass pulsed faintly as though breathing. Mom? She called. No answer. She turned and realized the attic door had closed on its own. The air grew colder. Shadows deepened. The glass shimmered and cleared. Max was there, standing inside the reflection, his face pale but gentle. He looked older now, his eyes tired. You found it, he said. Max. She pressed her hands to the glass. You're alive. He shook his head slowly. Not really. Time doesn't move here. I've been waiting since midnight, she swallowed hard. What do I do? His expression darkened. The harvest hour has one rule. It needs balance. Someone must remain inside to end the cycle. No. Her voice cracked. You already gave yourself up once. Behind him, the mirrored version of Emma appeared, her skin gray, her eyes black pits. She grinned. He's lying. The field needs you, not him. You belong here now. The attic lights flickered. The boards trembled beneath her feet. Don't listen to it, Max said. You can close it from your side. Break the glass, but if I do... He smiled faintly. Then it's finally over. The shadow Emma's laughter echoed through the attic. The vines on the mirror's frame began to twist, the roses turning black, thorns stretching toward Emma's hands. Come on, the reflection hissed. You know it's true. He's not real anymore. You'll only break him. Emma stepped closer, her breath fogging the glass. If I break it, you're gone too. Good, Max said. That's what I want. Tears streamed down her face. I can't lose you again. You're not losing me, he said softly. You're setting me free. The mirror rippled like water, and for an instant she felt his hand against hers, cold, but real. Then the clocks in the house began to tick all at once, overlapping in a chaotic rhythm. Tick, 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 tick. The attic door slammed shut. The lights exploded. Emma! Her mother's voice screamed from below. What's happening? Emma raised her fist. The reflection lunged. She swung. The mirror shattered. Light burst from it in a blinding wave, not white, but gold, like sunlight after a storm. The attic filled with the sound of rushing wind, of whispers fading, of laughter dying away. The vines on the frame turned to dust. Emma fell backward, gasping. The air stilled. Every clock in the house stopped. Then, one by one, they reset themselves. 12:01, 12:02, 12:03, real time again. Mrs. Henderson burst into the attic, coughing through the haze. Emma! Emma stood trembling, the mirror shattered to glitter on the floor. It's done, she whispered. They hugged, sobbing. Outside dawn broke, true dawn. The light that poured through the windows was warm, alive. Birds sang in the oaks. The soil of the field glistened wet, new grass already sprouting through it. The house was still. For the first time, truly still. Weeks passed. The for sale sign went up. The Hendersons packed their boxes and left without looking back. Neighbors said the house seemed lighter now, friendlier. Even the old gate no longer moaned when the wind blew. No one mentioned the faint ticking that sometimes echoed from the attic. Months later, a white minivan pulled up the driveway. A new family stepped out, a man, a woman, 2 children. The realtor smiled, jingling the keys. Old place, but newly restored, she said cheerfully. You'll love it. So much history. The youngest child, a girl with bright eyes, wandered to the porch. She touched the brass doorknob, polished, shining like a mirror. Inside it for just a moment, a faint reflection smiled back at her. A girl with dark hair and kind eyes. Then the reflection blinked. And somewhere deep in the house, behind the walls, a clock began to tick again. Tick, Tick, tick. Epilogue. The whisper returns. That night, when the new family went to bed, the little girl left her window open. At exactly midnight, the wind picked up, and from far across the field came a familiar whisper, soft as the rustle of dry corn. Welcome home,